Mastermind, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options, and not having a clear plan is the enemy. Using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets of any kind. It can be cryptocurrency, it can be a business, it can be real estate, it could be captive insurance, it could be stocks. And you have all this like $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain, and you're looking for some flexibility and freedom for your investment plan and opportunities to be an entrepreneur, to be passive, to be retired, be out of debt, and unlock some freedoms so you can make an impact with your wealth. My name is Brent Swartz from MLB, and I'm founder of Capital Gains and Tax Solutions. And every single week, we are here to try to unlock what some might think is a mystery with the deferred sale trust. Make it really simple. You can digest it with live legal stories, commonly asked questions, and hopefully also anything that might be holding you back from taking the next step to working with us. And so we're joined every week by sometimes clients, sometimes potential clients, as well as some strategic alliances, and one of them being a certified financial planner, entrepreneur, financial planner, also a good friend, Jake Miller. Jake, how are we doing today?
Doing wonderful, Brett. It's another great Friday right before the weekend. I can see that you're out about. I don't know if you're on a football field or where you're at, but looking like you're enjoying the good weather anyway.
Yeah, we're at the Rod Cleef's Lifetime Cash Flow Conference boot camp here, and where we're learning about multifamily syndications. We're networking with the people, and it is the official lunch break, so people are walking around. I'll show you what it is. And Ron is amazing. Rod, he does these boot camps for multifamily syndications. He's got the best-selling book. Rob was actually on my podcast about a year and a half ago, and I was on his. Because I think it's like the number one podcast in the country for this. And so, anyways, he's a great guy, making an impact, helping people. A good at least 1,000, maybe 1,500 people here. So, honored to be here and learning and absorbing as much as I can. I think that's part of what we're all doing, right? Trying to absorb and learn from some of the best what they do, so that we can again make an impact for others. But how about you, Jake? Where are you today?
Today I'm in a city called Villavicencio, and there's a lot of business opportunities here, a lot of destination resorts, and we're looking at some possible investments for some of our clients that have DSTs or deferred sales trusts. Now, Brett, you're at a multifamily conference right now, and you've got one of these great speakers that actually has been on your show before, and you've been on his show and everything else. But I had somebody just the other day, and I think you'd be the best person to clarify this. What does multifamily have to do with a deferred sales trust? Can you make the connection there for everybody?
Yeah, great question. It has a lot to do with the deferred sales trust as it pertains to, first of all, options to invest into. So if you're a multi-family owner and you've sold out of multi-family into the deferred sales trust, you might be most comfortable investing into multi-family properties. And so the neat part about the deferred sales trust is that you can go in and out of the same asset class, except not having to do or be the primary general partner managing the toilet trash liability. For example, we just helped a client who exited 15 units in Sacramento, and for that particular exit, they sold for about $2.5 million. They had about $120,000 NOI, and they wanted to increase their cash flow, but save a lot of their time and their energy. And so we used the deferred sales trust to exit that asset. But guess where they're investing now? They're investing into multiple multifamily funds, as well as a syndication for a deal that looks really promising. And so whether you're selling multifamily or you want to invest into multifamily, the deferred sales trust is flexible to take the proceeds from the sale, as well as turn around and invest it into other sales. And by the way, they could still also go invest on their own deals in multifamily as well. So you don't always have to be just a passive investor. You can also be active. And so, did that answer the question, Jake?
It does, and I think if I were just to say the same thing in other words, I'd say that individuals utilize a deferred sales trust when they have a highly appreciated asset. Could be multifamily, could be something else. They use the deferred sales trust to more efficiently sell that transaction without having to pay taxes today. We're deferring that to the future. And then with those deferred monies, they can reinvest in other multifamily or other assets. It doesn't really matter as long as it's considered a reinvestment. And they can continue to grow what would otherwise be their overall net worth rather than having to prematurely profit share with the government beforehand, right?
Yeah, 100%. And those numbers are about 25 to 50% of your proceeds are going to be wiped out by capital gains tax, depending on your basis, depending on what state you live in. So, just that's the first thing to understand when we're on these masterminds. We're always helping people to clarify not only their vision for their wealth, but also clarify what the problem is. Because if you don't know what the problem is, you're gonna have a tough time aiming for how to solve the problem. And so you want to make sure you understand what your adjusted basis is, what your debt is, what the asset sales price is, and what the actual tax liability will be. And then look at the options for what is going to help you to achieve, again, the clear vision that you have for your wealth plan, for the impact you want to make, for the family generational wealth that you want to create. And you have one shot on a lot of these sales, right? You have one or two or three big exits in probably your lifetime, maybe more if you're really active in what you do. And each time you have an opportunity to preserve and create more wealth if you can defer capital gains tax, maybe even eliminate some estate tax, perhaps even defer some income tax. Because guess what, Jake? The government has a $32 trillion spending problem, right? Which means what we have or debt problem is a better way to put it, which is a big spending problem, which means we have a tax problem, right? So we have to have strategies in place. Otherwise, you're right. That tax is going to be paid, unfortunately, and probably not spent very well.
That's correct. And if only we could establish common and everyday finance principles, like personal finance principles to the government and help them manage their money that we give them. That way we'd all feel a little bit more comfortable. But since we can't do that, we can manage what affects us and when with a deferred sales trust, because we essentially are taking control over the timing of when we pay taxes by utilizing a deferred sales trust. Essentially, what happens is the proceeds of whatever sale that we're having right now could be the sale of a primary residence, could be sale of business, could be sale of Bitcoin, could be sale of real estate. We put the deferred sales trust in between it and the buyer and the seller so that the seller doesn't take constructive receipts of the proceeds and therefore is able to defer forward those taxes and utilize the underlying assets in the deferred sales trust to invest or partner with on other projects moving forward, or to simply retire on, and able to control what comes out of the trust and what you pay taxes on as time goes on. So basically, those are the two most common uses of the deferred sales trust: to control the funds that come out over time as if it were a retirement account, or to invest with on an ongoing basis for those serial entrepreneurs, those real estate investors, and those individuals who are moving from one industry to another industry, and they want to utilize the full amount of those funds minus attorney fees rather than minus taxes to do so.
Absolutely. And so what we're talking about here is tax flow, cash flow, and ability to build wealth. We're being very tactical, but I actually want to take something we learned today at Rock Boost Boot Camp. And it basically, this is the premise. Look, I can teach you all about real estate. In fact, here's the reality, though. It's only about 20% of what's going to take for you to be successful. In fact, 80% has to do with psychology and mindset. And so we're encouraging everyone here who's on our mastermind, who's part of our community, who's part of our coaching program, who's part of our strategic alliances, who are our clients, is developing a tax flow mindset that goes beyond just cash flow and accumulation and appreciation of wealth. And it's shifting to how do I connect the cash flow with the tax flow and the wealth accumulation and building, along with the bigger overall goal of impact, right? And so some things to help you develop a mindset of, he puts it as a mindset of success, is to make a decision on what it is that you're trying to achieve, and writing down what is it that you want. And I think this is a good exercise. And I imagine a lot of us write down our goals every year, maybe review them every quarter, maybe every week, maybe every day. But a good exercise is to write down exactly what you want. As well, the best way to elevate your mindset is to experience something better or bigger than when you currently are at. And so, wherever you may find yourself on your journey of exiting your business, your real estate, your other highly appreciated asset, being in these types of rooms like this that we're in right now to challenge you to think, I guess, a little bit bigger than what you currently are thinking, and to glean what from others' experiences, and that's what helps us to overcome some of the challenges. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges for sales trust. I want you to keep in mind there's really two main things that keep us back when it comes to taking action, and it has to do with mindset. And the number one is what, Jake? What do you think the number one thing for people that holds them back from taking massive action when it comes really just about anything, but especially impactful decisions with their wealth?
I'd say fear or uncertainty.
And I'd say you're spot on, right? Fear or uncertainty, not having clarity on the vision or the outcome or the team to execute that. And then number two, or number one is just fear of, is it too good to be true? Is it legal? I don't know if funds are protected. Who is the trustee? And so let's dive right into those right now, Jake. What would you say is a common theme you're hearing in the last week or so as it pertains to the deferred sales trust?
Well, why can't we do it retroactive? That was one of the things that I heard the other day. That's not a very difficult one, maybe not even the most common one. But I had a fellow who had a really big $23 million business sell, and he really wanted to do the deferred sales trust retroactive. But why can't we do that?
Yeah, and the biggest challenge is we have to follow certain laws, and these are laws that are put in place for us to follow, right? There's certain rules, and also I think it's part of where the government can actually track certain things. And so, for example, why is a 1031 exchange 45 days to identify, 180 days to close on the asset? Well, those are the rules, and what the rule basically states is when you take constructive receipt of proceeds, that's the taxable event into your personal account. So, like the 1031 or like some other strategies, when you receive personal money, that's when the tax is going to be realized, okay? And or just it's going to be due. And so they had to cut off, I think at some point whoever made this decision had to cut off the distinction between personal account and investment purpose using a tax deferred vehicle. And unfortunately, after you close escrow, they send you the $23 million. That's when the tax is triggered. Likewise, if you think of it like income tax as well, if you are working and you're receiving that income, you're going to be taxed on that because it goes into your personal account. Whereas with the deferred sales trust, we got to make sure we set it up prior to the close of escrow. Typically, even prior to even going to contract, is also part of the ideal way where the trust is going to step in between you and receiving it personally. And if we can do it in that order, you maintain what's called non-constructive receipt, which essentially means the funds aren't going into your personal account or would have, except for the trust coming in between. And that's what allows you to defer the capital gains tax and unlock the tax deferral. Jake, how did I do?
You did fantastic. And I would just sum it up and say it's an ownership issue. If you sold it, then you probably owned it, your business owned it, whoever owned it upon the time of sale, that's where the taxable transaction follows. One of the ways that we help avoid constructive receipt is we're actually moving the asset into a deferred sales trust. That's not something you can do retroactive. You have to, the deferred sales trust must be the owner of the asset upon the time of sale for the deferred sales trust to be able to defer forward the recognition of the proceeds until you take it out of the trust. Without that in place, without the right timing, I mean, it's almost like baking cookies. If you don't get the right ingredients in at the right time, it doesn't taste the same. So, something really important with the IRS, timing is critical, and ownership on the date of the sale is definitely critical.
Got to follow the rules. What would be the next one? And by the way, if you have questions along the way, if you're joining us, thank you for joining us. You can put it in the chat. We're also going to give an opportunity for you to unmute yourself here in the near future, where we're going to also just answer questions live right now. But Jake, what would be the next one, or should I tee you up with a question maybe?
I think, Brett, it would be good to identify, now that we're talking about ownership, maybe talk about and this is a common question, why is a third party, unbiased, unrelated trustee important? Why can't I, as a grantor, and help them understand that this is not a grantor trust, maybe go into the importance of a third party, unrelated, unbiased trustee and why that's critical for the deferral?
Yeah, great question. And so it kind of goes back to the initial question that we had just a minute ago. If you if you sell something to yourself or to a related party, like your son or your daughter or your spouse or your cousin or your brother or sister, um, the government says that is a taxable event. Right? You can't sell something where you basically getting personal benefit and still get tax deferral. So it's part of the rules that it needs to be a third party unrelated trustee, and that's what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. We provide that service. It's kind of like a 1031 qualified intermediary. It's kind of like maybe an IRA or 401k that you have. There's a custodian or there's someone who's monitoring and making sure to keep everything by regulation and the requirements that are based upon compliance. And so yeah, that's really, I think that the short answer to that is just simply that it's going to keep you from taking constructive receipt. And so you can have a trustee that's not third party, but then you're going to pay tax, right? I mean, you could sell your asset to your spouse for the same price, that you would have sold it to another buyer and tried not to defer tax, but they're going to tax you, right? Because that's in the same family. So that's the best answer, Jake. It just really comes down to constructive receipt, personal benefit, and if the government deems that you are doing that with a related party, and they do deem that, then it's a taxable event.
Very good. The other reason is sometimes a deferred sales trust is just complicated. And so it's kind of nice to have somebody who truly is a fiduciary of the trust, doesn't have ulterior motives, and that really represents the goals of what the funds are there to do. I just add that as a touchy-feely thing that we should all be aware of. Just yesterday, Brett, we were talking with a roofer who has a roofing company. It's been his baby. It's been his nest egg. Literally, all of his eggs are all in one basket, so to speak, with his roofing company. He's always taken all of his money and he's reinvested back in his roofing company. And his big question, I guess, was, how do I know what I can reinvest in that's not considered personal? Meaning, we were discussing that you can use the deferred sales trust to reinvest in other assets. And he's like, well, how do I know when it's an asset that qualifies that I can reinvest in and when it's not? What would you tell him?
Well, I think it's we call it this thing, the smell test, which is actually like just what the IRS if they were to parachute down 365 days of the year and just take a picture of what you're doing at that particular asset. So one example is a rental house on the beach. Okay, well, are you actually Airbnb-ing it for 90-95% of the time it's being rented out, and you can show that there's renters that are renting it, or are you living there saying that it's a rental property and it's really your primary home? It's not really being rented, and your cell phone bill matches the exact address 90% of the time, right? So these are some things, and maybe you don't even have a primary. You're just literally living there. You sold your other primary, and so it's actually pretty easy for if an auditor were to look just on the facts there. So I think that's the first thing. Is it truly what you said it is? Is it your primary home? And so the trust will invest, and the reason the government does this is to spur economic growth, spur study of macroeconomics, which keeps the money flowing, creates more jobs. When it creates more jobs, it actually creates more tax revenue. So they're actually the ones who win the most here. New property tax values, commissions for brokers. As we manage as the trustee and Jake as the financial advisor, guess what? We get paid and we pay tax, and so that is the nature of it. So, and also, like you could say, maybe it's like a car. Like I want to buy my Lamborghini. Okay, and you're running a business to rent it out. That's totally legit. But if it's not, again, if it's just for personal fun, entertainment consumption, it's taxable.
So a lot of it has to do with the real intent and actual use of whatever asset that you reinvest in, right?
Correct.
Now, we also have with us today the Jake Carpenter, calling in from, I don't know if this is the family car, one of the classic cars. Jake, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself and maybe tell us about one of the most recent questions or concerns that you've helped somebody answer in regards to the deferred sales trust?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm in one of my Cadillacs. I just registered for the Corvette show here locally, which is one of the largest in the country, with a couple of my Corvettes. But yeah, it's a great day here. Probably the biggest thing that I've run into lately that Brett and I both talk about, Jake Miller talks a lot to people about the same thing, is why have I not heard about the deferred sales trust? Why if this is such a great strategy, it's been around for about 27 years. There's been thousands of closes, 24 IRS audits, no change, the most vetted capital gains deferral strategy on the planet. Why have I not heard about it? And so I'm going to address that really quick, and then I'll give it back to Brett or Jake. I'll give it back to you. And that is this. For a long time, for many, many, many years, we had people that were growing and building their real estate portfolios, their businesses. These are what we call the baby boomers, okay? And so now the baby boomers are getting older. The 1031 exchanges don't work. They've been working the business. So let me back up. The 1031 exchanges have worked over and over and over again as they've grown their investment real estate portfolio. And now they're at the point where they've got 30 to 40 years into their business, building their business. And maybe their business is located in real estate that they own, but they're ready to do something different. They're not ready to build. They're not ready to grow. They just want to cash in on all of that capital appreciation that they've built up in their business. They're ready to cash in on all the capital appreciation built up in their real estate. And they're ready to redeploy that, and this is important, in a very passive way. So they can not have to deal with the trash, toilets, the tenants in the real estate, the liability and the management in the business. And they want to just sit back and enjoy the rest of their retirement years, so to speak. And so most of the time, when something works, you don't really need to go out and find something else, because the 1031 exchange has worked for so long. They've been working so many years in their business, they haven't really thought about how to have an exit plan or an exit strategy. And that's where Jake Miller, Micah on her team, Brett Swartz, myself, other strategic partners, we help surround our clients, do the due diligence, and come up with a really, really good exit strategy, so that when it's ready for you to sell and take a more passive role, or maybe just hit pause if you're younger for 5 or 6 or 7 years before you go back into an active management role, because maybe your kids are young and in sports, and when they graduate and go to college, it's time to kind of hit the play button again. We got to get an exit strategy so that you're not paying 30, 40, 50% in capital gains tax. And so why haven't I heard about it? 1031 exchanges have worked. You've been working in your business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. There hasn't been a need to find a different kind of capital gains strategy. The reason why your CPA hasn't heard about it is probably because there's no convenient little box to check on the paperwork that they normally do. This is not a traditional 1040 IRS filing, S corp, C corp type of thing. But what all of the CPAs and the professionals realize, once we go through the due diligence process, that really it's nothing more than an installment sale. That's based on IRC code 453. So that's probably the one that I hear the most. Why haven't I heard about it? It's because 1031 exchanges work, and your CPA, your run-of-the-mill CPA, doesn't have that box on their paperwork to check, and they get scared, and that's the reason why our team comes in, surrounds them, and helps walk them through the due diligence process.
Yeah, absolutely. And also add to that too, a lot of QI companies don't want you to know about it either. They want to keep you in the 1031 exchange. They want to keep you in the, where they make money, and you can't blame them. The neat part about our team is we have extensive experience with 1031 exchanges, Delaware Statutory Trust, Deferred Sales Trust, and we really like to open up all the options and let you make a decision. And sometimes it's actually multiple strategies. In fact, Jay Carper and I just closed a $10 million exit for a multiple investor, client of Jake's and now client of mine, where we did a multiple. We did a partial Delaware 1031 to relieve some mortgage over basis, and then a partial deferred sales trust. Another deal was a client of Texas. He recently bought some land in Oklahoma, some land in South Carolina, and then did a partial deferred sales trust. And so the neat part about what we do and what we're saying here is, although the deferred sales trust tends to be that cornerstone or that capstone or that keystone strategy for your wealth plan, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a one size fits all. You want to make sure you understand each of the major strategies, how they complement one another, and how it is going to help you reach your goals for your wealth. And that being said, too, bring your CPA. We encourage everyone to bring their CPA to the calls, ask the questions. It's you also have to realize when you're asking them, they may not know. They might be a little bit either embarrassed or just need to catch up, and they just need to jump on a call with us. And I would say we're probably 99% of the CPAs that jump on with us end up sending us referrals. They thank us for providing a solution for their clients that they've seen over and over and over again. Once they hear the track record, in fact, who created the strategy? A CPA. And that CPA is also a tax attorney. And he created about 27 years ago, thousands and thousands and thousands of closes, billions of assets that have been sold in value, have used it. And the key stat here is over 24 no-change IRS audits. Now, audits are probably the most important, state and federal, that there's been no change, no finding, successful. So it's batting 1,000. And once they hear and understand and they see and get the sense for who we are, again, 99% of them join us, and it becomes their go-to solution because they are very well aware of the challenges with the 1031 exchange. On top of that, too, there's not a lot of exits happening all the time, right? I mean, you might face an exit once every 5 or 10 years, maybe once every 20 years, and so I think there's fewer opportunities for CPAs to be educated on something that maybe 20% of their clients would qualify for. $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. On top of that, they may only do that once in their lifetime, and so it's just not something that a CPA on 10,000 pages of tax law, right, and the IRS code is going to be up to, right? And so that being said, those are just some of the reasons why someone might not have heard about the deferred sales trust. And they also want to be your broker. A lot of brokers don't want you to know about this. I'm a broker myself with my team, collectively close over 10,000 transactions. Like, people don't, they want to make money with being a broker. And so I totally get that. And before I knew about the deferred sales trust, the main way we thought about making money was through 1031 exchanges and just keep the wealth inside of real estate, where now with the deferred sales trust, you can diversify into securities, you can get to liquid funds, you can get out of debt, right? So I think it's also important to focus on the ability to de-risk your wealth, preserve your wealth, invest it in some of the biggest companies in the world, keep liquid funds, and then go back into real estate if and when it timing makes sense, right? So that being said, Jake Miller, you want to add anything to that?
I just want to add that this being a deferred sales trust and there being a lot of other financial and tax strategies, everybody's situation is different, right? We've had people sell a racehorse. I mean, it's an asset. We've had people have an exit with the deferred sales trust from Bitcoin. We've also had people turn around and buy crypto. In the same sense, we've had people sell their business that they've invested all their time, sweat, energy, all their life, all their eggs in one basket. And the deferred sales trust was a means by which they could then diversify their underlying assets and not just have everything in one industry. At the end of the day, overall planning is important and critical. And we invite everybody's advisors, their counselors, their spouse, anybody that is a decision-making influencer for this type of a decision and the decisions post-transaction. We invite them to come to the table and get educated. And Brett, when you say, when people come to the table, 99% of the time they end up doing a deferred sales trust when they have an eligible transaction. That's because we spend a lot of time educating. Sometimes there are other professionals, whatever, we make them sign an NDA, what have you, just so that we can keep everything consistent, congruent, whatever. But then we pull back the hood, as Jay Carpenter would say with all of his classic cars, we pull back the hood, well, we show it all. And we let them see and we let them know. We let them ask all the questions that they want to ask. I mean, literally, Brett, when I was consulting with a CPA firm, a CPA owner-only association, where we had to help them with tax strategies, what works, what doesn't work, when it does work, what court case says that you can do this, what court case says you can't do that. This was one of the easiest strategies. Why? Because it has never been disallowed. Because it has never been disallowed, we didn't have to play on both sides of the fence when it works, when it doesn't work, and how close to your client's situation is it for both sides. We didn't have to do that. It was, hey, if you play within these guardrails, and if you have an eligible transaction, this does work, and it has worked 100% of the time. And if you play within these guardrails, it should work again. That is just a huge peace of mind going forward, and it shortens a lot of the discussion to education.
Absolutely. So we're going to come to deal stories. You can kind of bring some of this live, and also if you have any questions on yourself, as well as you can put your question in the chat, and we are happy to answer those and go through those. I think it's good to know what assets this works for, and we mentioned it a few times. And in fact, we're working on a large jet. It's an exit of like an airplane, a private jet. Which is an interesting play for the DST as well. But we've done Bitcoin, we've done Ethereum, we've done business sales, we've done multifamily properties, we've done car washes, technology companies, you name it, we've done it. Car washes, did I say that already? And so one of them was a recent deal down in San Diego. It was 4 owners of a car wash, and they were developers. And their main goal was to have some flexibility with their own capital. So they wanted to kind of separate the partnership a little bit. And one client actually just wanted to pay his tax. So one question that comes up is, well, if I do this, does everyone have to do it? No. In fact, one of them just paid all of his tax. The other 3 had a deferred sales trust created for their part of their exit. That is never commingled. It's never any personal business accounts of any other account. It's only simply to do business with them and that single individual or their spouse together. And these trusts can be created, and the promissory note is what they receive. Those promissory notes are typically 10-year notes with some form of interest. The interest rate ranges from maybe 6 to 7 to 8 to maybe 9%. And it's a compounding interest rate, typically net of fees, what we're able to achieve over a 10-year period of time. And these promissory notes can be passed to children. So you can keep this going for a long time in 10-year increments. Think of it kind of like a refinance. And this promissory note can be part of your living trust. And that's the neat part about the deferred sales trust. You can unlock compounding interest by deferring that tax. In this scenario, they're deferring around 40% of their gain. In fact, they built this. It used to be a taco stand on 2 acres. They built it for $4 million. This car wash with the taco stand inside of it. They tripled the guy's business. He's really happy, and they sold the asset for about $13 million. And so that gain there was about 40% of that gain would have been taxed multiple millions of dollars. And so instead of paying that tax, they were able to defer that, pay off their debt, have liquidity. The biggest thing for them is timing. In fact, they knew the marketplace was too high at the time, so they did not 1031 exchange, let alone not only that, but they also wanted to build land. They wanted to build on land. They didn't want to have to buy something of equal or greater value, which is part of the challenge with the 1031 exchange. And so essentially they put the money in what we call like a safe harbor. They put it in very safe, diversified investments, as well as some just fixed investments, just money market accounts. Some of it was in some lending to multifamily properties that are paying about 10%. And along the way, they've just been very, very, very patient. They also put it into a couple hotel opportunities that were some syndications, which is nice. And long story short, they were able to diversify their wealth, preserve the capital gains tax, and now they're positioning themselves to create the wealth. And that's the biggest thing with the deferred sales trust is time. Time to make great decisions when you feel comfortable and not having to make decisions into assets that otherwise you didn't want to invest into, or you just weren't ready to invest into, right? And so the deferred sales trust provides that stability. It's also a client of ours who exited 5 GP positions out of apartment complexes. His name is David, and you can actually go to my YouTube channel and you can watch his entire story about exiting multiple multifamily exits over $120 million worth of property. And he was a GP on, he had a lot of other LPs, so his positions were a sliver of that 120 million. But every time he would exit, he was looking at 25 to 30, 35% of tax on the gain. And he thought about it. He said, Brett, if I do 3 of these, it's like I did an extra deal. Because when I was exiting before, I was just paying the tax. And so we exited a $48 million deal in Nevada. We exited a deal in Phoenix, Arizona for $16 million. I think that there was another 2 in Nevada. And that's a great opportunity for him to defer the tax and to build more wealth. That being said, does anyone have any questions? Maybe Mike could also jump in as well if no one jumps to the gun here on unmuting their mic and asking a question. Any thoughts or feedback for Jake Carpenter, Jake Miller, or myself?
Yeah, so I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but I really like how you were talking about just the diversification of how the revenues, you can actually start using those revenues, right? So, I mean, let's talk about a real estate property, and that's very common, right? You have that property, but now you're actually able to receive those revenues from that asset that you have. But Brett, would you maybe, or either of you Jakes, talk a little bit more about just the requirements? I know that you had mentioned it was $1 million. Why is it $1 million? And maybe some of the aspects as far as that go into it for like depreciation or recapture or adjusted basis and things like that.
Pass that one to Jake Carpenter first, and then maybe Jake Miller can jump in. Okay, go ahead, Jake Miller, and then we'll get Jake Carpenter to weigh in. Yeah.
Yeah, I just say that there's no hard and fast IRS rule or anything like that for the $1 million. It's more of a rule of thumb for us, meaning that it's a no-brainer. What does that mean? It's a super easy decision when there's enough tax paying that, hey, if you're eligible, the deferred sales trust works when you have over $1 million of gains that would be treated at capital gains tax rates. So that's the 20% federal plus whatever state, and in addition, oftentimes the 3.8 Medicare, right? So once you're paying over $200,000, it's almost a no-brainer that the deferred sales trust, the extra effort to work with a new team of people, the extra effort to work with a qualified, non-biased, third-party trustee, etc., and to go through this process, to have another entity set up, this trust, everything else, it's a no-brainer. It just makes perfect sense. It's an easy decision. Now, could it be a transaction that's less than that? Sure, it could. It just takes more calculations, more hand-holding, more working with your accountant, more working with, your personal, specific situation to confirm that, hey, all of this still makes sense. Jake Carpenter, what would you like to add?
Yeah, perfect. You did a great job there. That generally, like Jake Miller said, we're looking for what Brett Swartz would call a home run, right? So if it's over $1 million of total proceeds, and there's $1 million subject to capital gains tax, it makes sense to do the deferred sales trust versus paying the tax. Once you go through the vetting process. And this kind of goes into a deal that Brett and I are going to be working on opening up here soon. This is a farmer that has two different sales. So the first sale doesn't necessarily qualify, but if you have multiple sales within a few months to a year, you can package these up in one trust and just have multiple promissory notes. So, the qualifications is if you don't want to spend the sales proceeds on some kind of personal use purchase, you've got $1 million of net proceeds and $1 million subject to capital gains tax, which again is kind of a no-brainer. You go through the due diligence process, get your professionals on board. Then guys like Jake Miller, myself, Brett Swartz, Micah, we all surround your professionals. We come up with a strategy for you. But That's kind of what qualifies for you. In this case, this guy's in Montana, and he's got an equipment sale first that would not qualify necessarily as a home run for the deferred sales trust. But then on the heels of that equipment sale, he's got cattle sales. So those two together are far more than what would qualify him, and they're going to happen within a year. So if you have an asset and maybe multiple assets, and you go, hey, if I sell this first one, it's not going to qualify, so I'm just not going to look at the deferred sales trust. Keep in mind that you can wrap up several different sales. Generally, as long as they're going to be sometime within about a year of each other, you can wrap those into the strategy, and then the taxable amount can be added up. So if you've got a total amount within 2 or 3 transactions that's going to be over $1 million subject to capital gains tax and $1 million net proceeds, then you're good to go. So that's kind of what I wanted to add.
And I would also say too is that they work on a conditional arrangement where you don't actually pay anything up front to bring it to the table. You can visit with the trustee, you can visit with the advisors, even with the attorney, and see if it makes sense in your situation first. And then if you choose to use it in the close, that's at the time that any fees would be taken out. So, very nice. Speaking of which, how would you get started? Like, what would be the next steps if this made sense for someone?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So to get started, first of all, clarify if you have an eligible transaction, which is simply $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. So that's the first thing to just find out. So to know that, you want to know what your adjusted basis is. You want to clarify that with your CPA. It's cost plus improvements minus depreciation. And so once you have that adjusted basis number, then you, of course, take your sales price minus the closing cost. You get a number. You minus that one from the first number, and that'll tell you if you have $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. Now, if you have two at $500,000 each, you can also combine those two to make it. That's what we found to be a good home run for the deferred sales trust. So, assuming that is the case, then you don't want to sign anything else at this point. You don't want to sign any listing agreements. You don't want to sign any APA or purchase agreements. You want to slow everything down and start to work with us to be able to weave the deferred sales trust into your transaction. You want to make time your friend, and you want to underwrite the trust, underwrite the returns, underwrite who we are, how we work, the strategy, all of that first before you're in the heat of selling. Because guess what? It's emotional, no matter what you're selling, especially if it's a business or real estate or something that's highly appreciated. Everything increases in intensity as you move closer to closing, and so you just want to be able to click clearly and have certainty, like Jake was saying before. Have no fear about who and what you're getting into, and then at that point, it's just really simple. You're picking the name of a trust, and the trust is going to be weaved into the contract with the tax attorney. It's a little bit different for every deal. It's customized. Whether it's a C Corp, S Corp, LLC, there's partners, and then this trust will receive payment at close of escrow. Investment accounts open typically at places like a Charles Schwab, and at that point, the funds are received. Their investments starts made into deals with you or deals with other passive groups and or just in securities until you find an opportunity. So it all just depends on your investment time horizon, your risk tolerance, your cash flow. Those things will all be built out. How long does this all take? Well, you also might want to talk with some of our clients too, right, to get comfortable. We can say give us 5 hours of your time. Basically, kind of like an hour right now, initial research, an hour with us one-on-one, and then an hour with the tax attorney. So it's kind of like 2-on-1, and then an opportunity to speak about an hour with our clients, and then the last hour for pre-planning. And you're probably going to be 95% of the way there. The other 5% is that mindset, is that fear factor, is that that CPA, the things that are outside of our control. We want to make sure we bring those people in along the way. Those are the next best steps, Micah. How'd I do?
Great, absolutely great. But you didn't hit on how long it takes to actually set up the trust.
It can literally be 72 hours. It could be 24 hours. It could be 2 weeks. I mean, it's not the time it takes to set up the trust on our end. It's the time for us to have a know, like, and trust enough equity in that no like and trust relationship, us with you and you with us, right? To be able to execute on a high level. This is part of why we work on a conditional basis, 100% conditional, to get that pressure off the table. But as soon as you say go, hey, I'm ready to go, then we can basically set this thing up in about, call it, to be safe, let's say 7 straight days. We do open the accounts for the financial institutions, the bank. That can take a little bit more time depending on the bank and the financial institution. But that's really it. And then weaving into your contract, speaking with your team, that's where the communication takes place. So.
Perfect.
Well, very good. I think it would be wonderful maybe to pick a few people out of the crowd. Prasad, where, if you don't mind, where are you calling in from today?
Lincolnwood, Illinois.
Illinois, wonderful. I actually was with some clients just yesterday from Illinois. I was with them on Zoom, I guess, and they sold during the pandemic some medical laboratories that they were fortunate enough with timing to get going for the antigen, the PCR, and a number of other fluid tests. And they sold when it was big and when everything was high, and they did really well. Do you mind telling us what you do, Prasad?
Well, I'm also in the real estate industry. I'm a managing broker, and also I'm in the financial industry. I'm a licensed financial professional, and I'm doing some pre-planning for myself, at the same time acquiring some knowledge, so that I can pass on to the clients.
Wonderful. We've actually helped 4 financial planners sell their practices with the deferred sales trust. And Brett Swartz, myself, and others have been instrumental in helping them through the entire process. And so it works, and it helps even financial planners have a successful exit without having to pay taxes today. So keep attending every Friday. And once you get to the point where you have maybe a letter of intent or you're getting into some serious negotiations, that's when we can come in and look at your specific deal and give you specific advice. Thank you. Appreciate you for joining in today.
And also, Prasad, being that if you're in real estate, right, it's a good opportunity to win listings from clients who are elected to sell because they don't have that 1031 line. Right? And that's one of the objections that people say is, hey, I'd love to sell with you, Prasad, and list the property, but I don't have that 1031 lineup, or go find me that up leg, and if you can find me that up leg, then I'll sell, right? And it's like, okay, let's check the egg. I found the deal. It's still being there by the time we sell, or 1 in a million, right? And so that's the challenge. And so when you provide this bridge, that big challenge, you win the listings, and this is what we continually do. In fact, we're looking at maybe listing another property for a client of mine in Colorado for this exact challenge now. It'd be a repeat client, but this is the beauty of this. It can become the way that you win and attract new listings, right? Which are hard to come by. These price expectations and interest rates are kind of separated, and so you got to really make sure you have a key solution to help. And so I think you get that you're being in Illinois, New York, New Jersey, California. These are the highest tax states, and you got to make sure you have a good plan for that tax flow exit. Otherwise.
Sounds like we missed him. That was great.
At the same time, you would have heard recently that in the state of Illinois, especially in the city of Chicago, they're working on increasing the transfer tax. I'm sure you all heard about it.
Tell us more about it. I know in LA they have a 5 mansion tax. It's 5%, basically, if it's above $5 million, and I think it's like 4.5. It's above 10. It's brutal. What do you think? What are they going to increase it to, Prasad? What's the number?
They said 3 times. It's not done yet, but they're working on it.
What is it now?
And the tier system.
What is it now? What's the number?
5 and 5.
Okay, so right now it's for 1 million. It's 1.5, but it might go all the way to 5. Is that what you're saying?
Point less than $1 million right now. So, but they're thinking about increasing 3 times, except the first tier, which is less than $1 million. So 1.5 is going to be second tier, and the 5 million is the third tier. So third tier for sure is going to go 3 times.
It is brutal. Yeah, the government has a spending problem, and they're running out of money. It's always the answer, and it's California. Same thing in LA.
Hey, Brett, we do have one other question. I did answer a little bit, but I want you to hit it a little bit more as far as just the fees involved. And so we have a couple of questions. One's involved with the fees, and one is involved with the promissory note.
Yep. Yeah, so I'll talk about the fees quickly. So the fee for setting up a trust is there's a couple of fees. The first fee is to the tax attorney. Tax attorney provide lifetime audit defense, all the legal paperwork, setting up the trust, working with your CPA to properly report it on your personal tax returns. And essentially, it's 1.5% on the first million of the gross sales price and 1.25 on anything above that. So let's just say it was $1 million sales price, $15,000. Pretty simple, right? Now let's imagine $1 million net proceeds hit the account the next day. On this scenario, it'd be $985, right? Because you just paid the 15.
Jake Miller, you want to handle that and the rest of it?
This is like the old school game of touch and go, right? Anyway, Brett, now that you're back, we'll let you jump right back into that.
I'll try again, but let's see if it goes back out, right? And it'll be about 1.5 to 2% on a recurring basis, and that includes like a financial professional like Jake Miller, myself, the trustee, or Jake Carpenter, financial professional. And so collectively, it's about 1.5 to 2%, just depending on what's called the AUM or the accounts under management. There's some miscellaneous fees like the tax return fees, bank fees. Our overall goal is to typically net 6, 7, 8, or 9%. The account would be at, let's see, if it was an 8% interest rate on the property. Over a 10-year period of time, these numbers we believe are attainable, and we've been able to attain them. But everyone's risk tolerance is different. If your risk tolerance is higher, the interest rate could be lower. And so that's essentially what the fees are. In regards to the promissory note, I'm not sure exactly what the specific question there is, but how is the rate determined could be a question. Well, you're going to fill out a risk tolerance questionnaire, and the risk tolerance questionnaire will score your level of risk, and that level of risk will score the interest rate on the promissory note. That's how we determine, well, how do you know if it's 8, 5, or 6, or 7, or 9? It's based upon that risk tolerance questionnaire. And then you are owed back that money. So let's say it's $1 million plus 8%, that's $80,000 per year. And there's a balloon payment. Typically, we structure that into the 10-year term, of which you can receive all your $1 million back plus the 8%, depending on how the performance of the trust is done on the investment. Or you could renew that promissory note for another 5 or 10 years or 3 years, and essentially continue to defer the tax. So hopefully that answers the question, Micah. And Jake Miller, if you want to add anything or subtract.
No, I think that's very helpful. I mean, essentially, we align the ongoing investments with the individual's goals and objectives, time horizon, and everything else. As you mentioned, as a minimum, we try to make sure that we're meeting the promissory note obligations plus whatever fees that are incurred by having us all come together. And of course, anything above and beyond that is just extra engraving. That's part of you building your overall estate. Oftentimes, outside of your estate, I think, Brett, maybe we should touch on that one last topic. How this, if done correctly, can freeze the assets in somebody's estate and help them grow assets outside of their estate for estate tax planning.
Absolutely, and also just touch on a little thing that might make some confusion. So on a DST 1.0, if it were to out-earn all of that 8% plus the fees, about 1.5 to 2, every single year compounding, let's say at 15% every year, there's an extra 5%, let's say, left over. That, unless there was some kind of option purchased prior to that, that upside goes to the trustee. Okay, this is part of the business purpose. It's not our intent to have that, but just something to keep aware of. Like if it goes above and beyond. Now, people typically partner with the trust in order to give some other additional ways to carve out upside. So there's some advanced stuff that we can go into later. But on the DST 2.0, you can actually just eliminate that altogether. In fact, you can freeze the assets outside of your taxable estate upon the exit of those assets. which will eliminate that 40% death tax, as well if the overearn, your kids can be your beneficiaries. Actually, really anyone can be the beneficiaries as long as they're not your spouse, and that can also create opportunities to get additional upside. And so these are things that under conditional engagement agreement, sit down with your specific deal, we can walk through. But essentially what Jake is saying, if you have an estate tax problem, which essentially as of 2026, if you have more than a $14 million married net worth and a $7 million single, then yes, you have an estate tax challenge, because it does not solve, or a stepped up basis or a 1031 does not solve for a stepped up for the exclusion amounts. It has nothing to do with estate tax, and estate tax is 40% of anything that's inside of your taxable estate. To break this all down as an example, we had a client for $25 million sold a $5 million asset in Colorado. And the major reason they did this was because they have an estate tax challenge, and they're around 60 years old. And they're saying, look, we're growing our wealth pretty rapidly, and we think we could go to 50 or $100 million by the time they may pass away. And they need to start doing some estate tax planning. And so they use the DST plus, the DST 2.0, to eliminate that estate tax. Not only do they eliminate that $5 million that they exited from the multifamily property, but all of the growth of those assets that are right now invested in securities, 100% securities, liquid investments that are growing, that is outside the taxable estate. Well, Jake Miller, how did I?
As always, Brett, you do a wonderful job. Appreciate you tons. We have 3 minutes left. I don't know if we want to wrap up, tell people how to reach out. Should they have more questions or a specific life event or sell that they'd like to discuss with us personally, how they can reach us?
Absolutely. Why don't you start Jake Harper, then you go Jake Miller, then I'll wrap this up.
Yeah, so there was a lot that we said today between Jake Miller, Brett Swartz, myself, and Micah. So if you need to get a hold of us, reach us and do a complimentary consult. You can reach me at 509-396-5292 to discuss your details and get some clarification. You can also go to www.carpentercapitalllc.com. And Jake Miller, over to you.
Absolutely. So strategictaxsolutions.com. Again, strategictaxsolutions.com. There's a little booking tab. You can click on the button. You can schedule a no obligation consultation. In addition, some of our investments can be found on AlphaMark with a PH, alphamarkcapital.com. A lot of our DST clients reinvest in other assets that we help them manage.
Amazing. If people want to get in touch with me, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You also look for the brand new book that we just released, the bestseller, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. It's on Amazon. If you're a business professional, you're wanting to get coaching, and you're wanting to level up your game as it pertains to helping your clients exit highly appreciated assets, you can go to experttaxsecrets.com. That's experttaxsecrets.com. As well, want to remind you, right? Good friends don't let their friends 1031 exchange without a rescue plan. So make sure you're a good friend to everyone out there, and you're connecting them with for any 1031 exchange needs, so they can have a regular 1031 deferred sales trust with a backup plan, and a Delaware statutory trust as an opportunity to complete their exit plan for investment real estate. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we look forward to next week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.